Hello and welcome to the Critically Clueless Monk, and today we are in Mount and Blade 2 Bannerlords. Now this video is about smithing. This is my ultimate guide to smithing. What I would recommend you focus on, a few tips and tricks that I've picked up along the way, and just my general knowledge. Now I've spent a long time smithing in this game. For anyone wondering, in this playthrough that I'm getting all this information from, I'm currently like 2,200 days in, so this is an old playthrough. I have a hell of a lot of money. In fact, I currently have over 5 million dinars. Much of that I got from smithing. I have brought clans, I have brought armor, I have brought an abundance of troops. I cannot tell you just how many dinars I have spent in this playthrough, but every single one of them I've pretty much got from smithing, and I'm here to tell you exactly how I have achieved that. If this is the kind of content that you want to see, guys, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, that we don't miss out on more videos just like this. We have over 50 Bannerlords videos on the channel, all specifically catering towards console players. Now, smithing doesn't just have to be about money. Every single person that you saw me cut down then was with my own crafted weapons. The weapons that you can craft in game happen to be stronger, better, cut through enemies faster than anything you can pick up in game. So learning how to smith and craft your very own weapon is going to be beneficial to you, not only for your pocket but for yourself on the battlefield as well. And personally, it's just my opinion, but I happen to think that the created weapons, the leeway you get with what you can actually create, happens to be the most beautiful weapons in the game to boot. Now, my first little tip for you guys is going to be, don't neglect the orders. You may open up this order menu whenever you go into smithing and think, hey, I'm not quite there yet, I don't have enough experience. Have a go at these guys, because regardless of whether you've got the experience or the difficulty required in order to make these orders, you will get paid. For every order that you get paid for, you'll unlock more higher tier orders, and some of these orders you can end up making a hell of a lot more than you ever would for making a weapon and then just straight up selling it. You can make some serious bank for completing these orders. Don't neglect it. Do it early, do it often, and you can see some real gains here. My next little tip that I'm going to throw in is that you personally do not have to be the smith in your party. In fact, you don't just have to have one smith either. Every single party member that you carry along with you, that's every single companion, every single family member, they can all smith. All you have to do is click on their little face, select which dude you want to do your smithing, and hey presto, you've got an army of smithers. Now, this comes in a few different benefits. Having multiple people that can smith means that you can make sure that you completely optimize that tech tree when it comes to smithing. It also means you don't have to waste any stamina on, say, your main smith. You can get your lesser smiths to make that charcoal for you. And it also means that you don't have to waste those points on your main character if you don't want to. Now, any kind of guide like this really does have to start with the absolute basics. So we're going to go over the tech tree. I've done it in a couple of other videos, but I do think it's important just to remember. Now, if you do want the maximum amount of points, if you want to fill your tree, get all those levels that you can possibly get, you're going to need to have 5 focal points. You have to max that out, and you're going to also need 8 attribute points. Now you can see that I've got 7 attribute points, 5 focal points, but yet I've managed to achieve, the end of the tech tree, and I'm level 281, and I actually have the ability to learn legendary weapons. But You do get extra points for going over 300, so if you do want to go over 300 and get those extra points and everything it has to offer, you are going to need those 8 attribute points. But attribute points are extremely rare. They're kind of hard to get, and you might not want to waste them on smithing. So, you know, here's a heads up. You don't necessarily need to grab all 8 points in order to benefit from smithing. Now, I think a good question from anyone that hasn't smithed before is just how do I level up from smithing? Well, if we click on the button here and read what it says, basically performing any smithing action within the whole smithing menu is going to earn you that experience. So, you know, getting the experience is really, really easy. The better quality gear you often make and break down will give you more and better experience. Now, the first option you have is Effective Charcoal Maker. Now, this means that you can produce more charcoal from less hardwood, and it's extremely useful. Below that, you have Effective Iron Maker. Now, while this is a useful skill to have, if you need to have extra iron, the charcoal maker is the one that I would choose on every single companion and myself that I expect to use this smithing skill. Even if I don't think they're going to use the smithing skill, I'd typically try to get them up to level 25 just so they can get this one skill, because having more charcoal, having extra charcoal, requiring less hardwood is seriously useful. Take my advice here, get this perk on every single character you can. Next up, we have another must perk here. You have Curious Smelter, or you have the Steelmaker. Now, the Curious Smelter increases the rate of learning new parts designed by smelting by 100%. Now, learning those new parts, learning that higher tier parts is what gets you the money in smithing. So the higher level you have, the rarer the materials you're using, the more your item is going to sell for. And it's a really, really slow process. So picking up this perk will shorten that time and enable you to learn more parts quicker. Again, I would advise you pick this up on anyone that you plan on smelting items with. Personally, as you saw, I have a lot of companions, so they all typically have that. Underneath that, though, you do have Steelmaker, and being able to create steel whenever you need it is useful, especially at the beginning of the game when you're beginning your smithing life cycle. Having that can help. It's just another argument for having 2 or more smiths. Next up, we have Curious Smith. This doubles the chance of learning new crafting parts through smithing. That goes hand in hand with the last perk as well, so this puts us well over 200%. Again, pick up both of these perks. They're absolutely worth it. You'll want those new recipes as fast as possible, and smithing is certainly one of the best ways to do that. Below that, however, you have Steelmaker 2, which enables you to make fine steel whenever you want. Again, fine steel is going to be a material that you're going to be wanting to use a lot, because as you begin your game in smithing, being able to craft fine steel weapons is going to mean more money for you. So this just doubles down on that whole need for having multiple smiths to make the most out of it. Next up, we have Experienced Smith. You have a 10% chance to create a fine weapon if the difficulty requirements are met. Now, this also increases your relations when it comes to those orders. However, for me, what you need is Steelmaker 3, because this gets you the extremely rare steel. Now, this rare steel enables you to make the best, finest, highest quality weapons in the game. And that steel is extremely rare. Buying the weapons to, break it down in order to get that steel is extremely expensive. Being able to make your own will save you money in the long run. That being said, what I tend to do when it comes to making money is I make weapons that don't even require that steel. So it's more going to be for making your own weapons. And being able to make fine weapons doesn't mean that those weapons are going to be able to be sold for a higher price. That's just going to give you better stats on your weapon. Next up, we have Practical Refiner. Here, stamina spent refining is halved. Alternatively, you have Practical Smelter. Stamina spent here is half. You want both of these. Personally, I tend to put the Practical Smelter on my main smith here. But again, you could use both for the reasons printed here. Next up, we have, I guess, one of the S-class perks. We have Controlled Smith, or we have Vigorous Smith. Both of these give you an option to get an extra ability point, be it in Vigor or Control. Pick whichever you're using. If you're using melee weapons, you want to go Vigor. If you're using range weapons, you want to go Control. It's a nice little perk because we do have to spend quite a lot of attribute points to even, into smithing. So it's nice that we actually get something back. Moving on, we have the Artisan Smith, or under that you have the Practical Smith. Now the Artisan Smith gives you your trade penalty is halved for selling smithed weapons. Underneath that, your stamina spent for smithing is halved. Both of these are really useful. I tend to pick up Artisan Smith because what it means is that the weapons that you're able to make, you're going to be able to sell for a lot more. So your main smith, maybe even your main character, you'll want to pick this up on just so that way you can, sell your weapons for a decent price. The stamina thing, you can always rest, but being able to sell those weapons for a higher price means more money in your pocket, obviously. Now, Master Smith obviously gets you a chance to create Masterwork weapons, but again, they do not sell for more. They just have more points, more stats on them. After that, you have the Enduring Smith or the Fencer Smith. Again, these are attribute points. Choose accordingly. Personally, I tend to find that Enduring Smith is better. It's an attribute points which are rarer and harder to get. And lastly, we have our Sharpened Edge. Sharpened Edge or Sharpened Tip, it is about swing or thrust damage depending on which weapons you like to use. I typically end up going with Sharpened Edge just because swing weapons tend to sell for a little bit more, which happens to be what I tend to go for. And because I enjoy using them in battle, that's what I use. I use a one-handed, two-handed sword. Therefore, it suits me to choose that. Now, one of the best ways to not only open up more blueprints for weapons, but also for actually leveling up your characters is by breaking down weapons. Weapons that you get in battle particularly are really useful. All those little tiny weapons that you get from looters or you get from raiders and battles, you can break them all down. Of course, all these will give you different materials as well. It's also completely free, so you don't have to go from town to town in order to get the materials you need to begin your smithing journey. And although you do learn extra, blueprints from actually making the weapons themselves, I found that breaking those weapons down is where you actually get the most. That's when you learn the most. And when you're starting off, the wrought iron and steel is where you're going to be making the most of your weapons. Just trying to get out as many as you can for as much money as you can, just so you can constantly learn those more blueprints. Once you're able to make the fine steel weapons, that's when you're going to be making absolute bank. But until you're able to learn them, there are a few things you can do, like this dagger right here. This is absolute gold. If you manage to find it in towns and you have the spare money, I would pick these up as many as you can. They are found in imperial cities, and and absolutely worth picking up. These are, I think, fetch for around 200 dinars each. So they are kind of expensive, but absolutely worthwhile. And again, these tribal throwing daggers, these are also very, very worth picking up. Again, found in Imperial cities. You can get the fine steel from these two items and a huge ton of it. At the beginning of the game, you're going to be able to pick these up 200, 300, 400 at a time. As you begin to plow through the city, it does take these towns a long time to actually replenish these items, so fine steel can get a little bit hard, but get them early, build up the supply, and you should be looking good. Another thing which actually gets kind of hard to get is hardwood, because if you go on a smithing journey, you're going to need so much hardwood. A good tip is to know that the wooden hammers will give you 3 hardwood, and the blacksmith hammers as well does give you some key early materials when it comes to smithing. So they're 2 items that I typically try to pick up, just because buying wood, finding enough of it, can be rather challenging. And if all of this information is getting a little bit too much, what I would say is that smithing is it's a big journey. It's a big undertaking. It takes an incredibly long time. The devs know how profitable smithing is, and therefore they have tried to slow down the process of it gradually over the time. It used to be a lot quicker to get all these items and materials and money, so they have slowed it down a fair bit. But even so, right at the beginning of the game, if you go in and make yourself a two-handed sword, the most basic two-handed sword that you can make at level 1, you're going to be churning a profit. So, get those materials, get those simple materials, a bit of wood, a bit of wrought iron, and you'll be able to make yourself a longsword, sell that for a profit, and rinse and repeat. As you can see right here, we've got a very, very basic sword. It's not going to cost us too much at all. All of these items are level 1, so this is going to be the first one that you guys will end up making as well. Now, what I would say is, yes, I'm level 281. Your ability to make something in a well-polished order will not affect the price, just so you know. As you can see here, this is the basic sword. It's going to cost me 1,400 dinars to sell it. Bear in mind, I do actually have that profit perk, which does give me a little bit more, which means that when you guys make that two-handed sword, you're only going to be able to sell it for around 800 at the beginning, maybe even a little bit less. But as you get more proficient, as you unlock more blueprints and being able to throw in a level 2, a level 3, and so on, you'll see those profit margins going up and up. Now, the reason I say two-handed swords are best is because what I found is that everything else is just too much of a grind. For making two-handed swords, you get the most experience, meaning your character will level up quicker. Not only will they level up quicker, but two-handed swords seems to be the item that gives you the most blueprints quicker. Now, one thing I would say to that is that, of course, if you break your weapons down, you're not going to be getting too many two-handed swords, so you're not going to be making your blueprints that way. When it comes to two-handed swords, you will be making those blueprints or finding more blueprints by making them yourself. And as you just saw the sword that I made, it makes a fairly decent amount of money. Of course, that is with the finest and best quality resources that you can possibly use. However, you don't need to make the two-handed sword with that kind of steel. Making it just with your fine steel, you will make a huge profit doing so with that. And I found making them just with that fine steel, in other words, never tipping into the more expensive steel, gets you the most profit all around. Another good thing to look out for is when you make your sword, try and prioritize swing damage. Having that slightly higher swing damage will give you a little bit more value to your sword. So as you can see, we're making a sword right now, and I'm just trying to find a part that just gives me, you know, a stat or two extra in the swing department. And of course, we are looking for the higher quality items as well. You know, maxing out that level and the materials, the higher the materials we can use as possible. And let's just call this swing. There we go. And now if we pop into the shop, go to trade, you can see that the swing item is slightly more higher valued than the previous sword that was straight just the best parts. Now, as we were talking about earlier, we were saying about not using the finest steel available to us. So let's go back into that. Two-handed weapons. We're going to go all the way down to the bottom. Now, all of the best blades, unfortunately, do use the you know, the top tier steel. So if we go down for one level down, there we go. As you can see, these ones are all using fine steel, not the top level, not the most expensive steel, but the second most expensive steel in fine steel. So if we create this sword now with all of the parts we just had, this sword, we will see, let's just find this. We're still going to prioritize swing damage because, again, prioritizing swing damage is important. It does add to the value of our swords. There we go. Pop that all the way up as well. We're just trying to make sure the items we're using has the higher amount of resources as well, because using the more resources absolutely helps. So there we go. I think that one's good. And then if we go down here, and this big shiny bubble, this is what we were using. Which one gives us more points there? I think this one gives us the more points ultimately. And so naming, what should we name it so we know what we're going to find in a shop? Let's name it level 4 swing. So again, we're going for, you know, swing points, points on swing, and we're using the level 4 blade and not the level 5 blade. And if we have a little look-see at that, pop out of here and pop back into the shop, you can see now it's not as much money as, you know, using all the best parts, but this is more achievable. In other words, we can churn out more and more of these blades because that's still the, you know, highest level steel that we can possibly use. It's so expensive, you're not going to be able to get too much of it. Even if you make a ton of it, it's going to take you so much time, so much more extra resources. You might as well just lose that, you know, extra few thousand just so you can churn out more of them. And of course, now we have a recipe that we like. We just rinse and repeat with this recipe. Now my main smith is out of stamina, but that's okay because we can select on his head, tap one of our other smiths, and boom, they can start creating that item as well. And it doesn't matter if they're not at the recommended level. It doesn't matter if they're still learning or if they're low level or a complete beginner. As long as you've got those parts unlocked, you can make that sword you're trying to make regardless of the level or the ability of the smith using it. So again, that's why having multiple smiths and a huge roster of smiths being able to help you is going to maximize the amount of weapons you're going to be able to produce. And if we just pop now into the store, you'll see that even though we made all those weapons with all those different smiths, the weapons that we produced are all valued at exactly the same. We lost no value in the weapons that we produced just because we changed our smith. Now, I absolutely do recommend you guys start with two-handed weapons. However, I found a crafting recipe that is even more profitable than two-handed weapons. So once you do get into your game and you do get a ton of resources and you're able to unlock different parts, I would recommend you make this. Now, this is a two-handed pole arm, and if you make your two-handed pole arm exactly as I am on screen, you will net yourself a huge ton of profit. Now, as we saw, the weapon that we was making was with fine steel, so you know, fine steel was easier to get, and also we saw that the two-handed sword was around 25,000 dinars depending, but our two-handed pole arms exactly as I made, let's just call this, there we go, pop into trade, and if we go down and find the long G head, you can see that it nets us a huge ton more in profit. 41,000 dinars for this weapon, in fact, and it actually required less fine steel than our long sword as well. So really easy. For whatever reason, doing it as the short handle works out better than doing it as a long handle. So like I said, follow the crafting recipe that I put down and you'll be able to make a massive ton of profit with that two-handed pole arms. But that about sums up this video, guys. Hopefully it's helped. Hopefully these tips, tricks, and a few of the things that I've explained has helped you understand smithing a little bit more. If I missed anything, if you want me to go over anything else like one-handed weapons or maces or whatever it is, let me know down in the comments, because I'd be very happy to make another video or just to have a chat with you about it. And talk about having a chat, we do actually have an active and growing Discord. Many people inside the Discord are playing Bannerlords, and the link for it is down in the description. So if you want to join a server, say hi and chat about your game, just join in and come and say hi. But I've been a monk, we've been Critically Clueless, and I will see you in the next video real soon. Until then, take it easy and happy gaming.